Super God Gene, Chapter 11. Han Sen was digging a pit at the foot of the mountain, planning to bury the giant golden axe there. Although he escaped the manhunt of Son of Heaven by shapeshifting into the Blood Slayer, there was a limit to how long he could shapeshift. As one of the most powerful beast soul types, shapeshifting beast souls could directly impart significant changes to a human body, which could be unbearable for those with weak genes. The stronger the creature one wanted to shapeshift into, the more genopoints and bodies were needed. In general, for primitive beast souls, the number of minutes the body could withstand the shapeshifting was equal to the number of primitive genopoints gained. In addition, one mutant genopoint could support 10 minutes of shapeshifting with primitive beast souls, and in turn, 10 primitive genopoints could support 1 minute of shapeshifting with mutant beast souls. Now Han Sen had 8 sacred genopoints, which could last him only 8 minutes for shapeshifting as a Blood Slayer. Even counting the ordinary, primitive and mutant genes he had gained altogether, he could shapeshift for less than 10 minutes. It was enough for escaping, but if he were to fight a gang of people, he could only kill 1 or 2 before his time was up. No one could see a sacred blood beast soul if it wasn't summoned, yet the golden axe could not be turned invisible. The person he mainly had offended was Son of Heaven, yet the campaign was a joint one, and the axe should have been the mutual gain of all 3 gangs. Hence, Han Sen had pissed off all of them and could only bury the axe in that spot for the time being. If I could sell the giant golden axe, it should easily bring at least 2 million. Han Sen was still excited after burying the axe. A sacred blood gear was not as valuable as a sacred blood beast soul, but still considered almost priceless. If he could sell it, 2 million would be a small amount. As for the sacred blood beast soul, Han Sen had not even thought of selling. This was the bedrock of his survival and success in God's sanctuary, and it would be like killing the goose that lays the golden egg if he were to sell it. Returning to Steel Armor Shelter, he saw Luo Tianyang guarding the gate with others. Everyone who tried to enter the shelter was interrogated. Can you even see what beast souls I have? Han Sen had no fear as he had already buried the golden axe. A young man at the gate stopped him and wanted to do a body search on him, while Luo Tianyang said, "Why waste any time on that scumbag? How is it even possible that he would be $F***K off?" The young man pushed Han Sen away and turned to search other people. Han Sen looked at Luo Tianyang with a sneer and went into the shelter. Everyone in the street was talking about what had happened at Sunset Slope. Listening to people calling him doll, Han Sen thought, "Damn Su Xiaoqiao. Who told you to call me doll?" He was happy to know that Son of Heaven was furious and strode back to his room. In another room, Su Xiaoqiao stood in front of Qin Zan, almost in tears. "Zan, you need to believe me. I've told you everything I know. I really did not know Dollar, but only saw him once in Zephyr Valley and bought some swift mantises from him, which I gave to my bros as gifts. Just ask around if you don't believe me. They even helped carry the mantises back from the valley. I am not blaming you. I just want you to contact Dollar, tell him I am willing to buy his sacred blood beast soul and gear, and ask him how much he wants," Qin Zan said quietly. "But I really do not know where he is," Su Xiaoqiao said sadly. "Then go find him. Don't let anyone know about this and go look for him secretly. If you manage the task, I'll reward you." Qin Zan showed Su Xiaoqiao out after she gave the order, not waiting for his reply. After he left, Qin Zan frowned to herself. Who could Dollar be? Is he someone in Fist Guy's gang? Or was the whole thing orchestrated by Son of Heaven? If he really is on his own, can I get him on my side? If I can't, it would also be nice to purchase the sacred blood beast soul and gear. Almost at the same time, Fist Guy sent his men to look for Dollar in secret, trying to buy the sacred blood beast soul and gear from him. Although it was a joint action, the only one who suffered a loss was Son of Heaven. If it had not been for his sacred blood wasp arrow, the bloody slayer would have run away and there would have been nothing for Qin Zan and Fist Guy. Now they could share some flesh of the bloody slayer, so it had gone well for them. However, Son of Heaven lost a mutant beast soul mount and a sacred blood wasp arrow, while being robbed of the sacred blood beast soul and gear. Anyone in his place would have been exasperated. The entire Steel Armor Shelter was looking for Dollar, yet no one connected him to Ass Freak. Son of Heaven also put a price on his head, and even offered to pay a reward for any substantive information. The price was so good that even Han Sen wanted to offer himself for the reward. Primitive green-scaled beast flesh eaten. 1 primitive geno point gained. Han Sen squatted in the bushes, watching a deep pond near him while chewing meat jerky made from the green-scaled beast. Up until this point, He had gained 91 ordinary Geno points, 26 primitive Geno points, 0 mutant Geno points and 8 sacred Geno points. The copper-toothed beast was still slowly evolving, so Han Sen could only go out to hunt some primitive creatures, hoping to gain more primitive Geno points. Because the black beetle armor would draw too much attention, he could only go deep into the mountains where nobody goes, fearing that Son of Heaven would know where he was. Fortunately, God's sanctuary was so vast that there were many places where humans had never set foot, so it was rather easy for Han Sen to disappear. While staring at the deep pond, Han Sen suddenly heard a distant voice of a man and immediately tensed up. Super God Gene, Chapter 12. Soon, Han Sen saw a young man walking towards the pond in ragged clothes. He was covered with cuts and bruises all over and looked extremely tired. "Friend, there are iron-toothed crocodiles in the pool," Han Sen came out of the bushes and cried from afar. He meant well in warning the young man, but was also afraid that he might alert the crocodiles that he wanted to hunt. This young man looked very tired and seriously injured. If he drank from the pond without knowing the crocodiles were there, he could have gotten killed by the iron-toothed crocodiles hiding under the water. The young man saw Han Sen and became ecstatic. "What is this place? And how do I get to Glory Shelter?" he asked, staring at Han Sen. "Glory Shelter?" Han Sen hesitated, looking at the young man strangely. "We are in Techies Mountains north of Steel Armor Shelter, and I do not know where the Glory Shelter you mentioned is. I have come so far that I'm now in the territory of another shelter." The young man whispered to himself, looked up at Han Sen, and said with an almost commanding tone, "Take me to the shelter." Han Sen frowned, as the tone of the young man wasn't very polite. Quietly he said, "You go south from here. If you don't walk too slowly, you can reach the shelter before dark. I have to hunt, so I can't accompany you." Quote, Han Sen was preparing to go back into the grass, not expecting the young man to suddenly hit him in the back. Losing balance and falling to the ground, Han Sen knocked his head on a rock and started to bleed. "What are you doing?" Han Sen covered his wound and stood up, glaring at the young man. "All I want is obedience, not bulls *#T. Take me to the shelter." The young man looked at Han Sen coldly. F***KU. Han Sen summoned his bronze crescent spear and poked it at him. Rubbish basic spear skills taught in integrated compulsory education. Even though my beast souls were all ruined on the way here, scum like you can't compare to me. The young man looked at Han Sen contemptuously, raised one palm and slashed it at Han Sen's spear. The young man's hands looked nothing like hands of a man, but rather like they were sculpted out of a whole piece of white jade, giving off an incredible sheen. Crack! The beast soul spear was cut in half by his palm as easily as a steel knife cutting through wood. Hyper Geno art. With only half of the spear in his hand, Han Sen was horrified. Science and technology were of no use in God's sanctuary, but ancient martial arts played an unexpectedly important role. With all the Geno points gained, humans were able to perform some mythical ancient martial arts in the real world. Nonetheless, it wasn't the so-called chi but the power of genes that powered the ancient martial arts. So, the more Geno points gained, the more effective ancient martial arts would be. The research showed that ancient martial arts could stimulate and bring out the potential of genes, offering extraordinary power to mankind. A new type of martial arts was developed called Hyper Geno arts. Hyper Geno arts were deeply rooted in ancient martial arts, full of mysteries that couldn't be explained by science. Their practice methods were mostly monopolized by the upper class. The most advanced Hyper Geno arts were the least accessible. For those who graduated from a public school of integrated compulsory education like Han Sen, Hyper Geno arts were never an option. Only the advanced schools would teach basic Hyper Geno arts. If the process of gaining Geno points was compared to turning mud into steel, then Hyper Geno arts could decide whether the steel was to be made into knives and guns or simply left as a piece of metal. Acquiring genes to make the body evolve was merely acquiring the material, while Hyper Geno arts taught one to use the material effectively. "You know a lot for the scum you are." The young man looked at Han Sen indifferently. "This is your last chance. Lead the way or die." Again, he raised the jade-like palm as if he was an executioner about to perform his duty. If Han Sen didn't comply, he would cut his head off. "Kiss my ass." Han Sen summoned the black beetle armor and covered himself, kicking the young man with a leg sweep. "You asked for it." The young man's face darkened, his jade-like palm chopping towards Han Sen's leg. Clank! Han Sen's leg was knocked away, and there was a white mark on the golden armor. The young man was also forced to step back from Han Sen's kick. Surprised, he looked greedily at Han Sen's armor. It didn't break under my Jadeskin. Must be sacred blood beast soul armor then. A scum like you having such a nice thing is just a gift sent from heaven. Hand over your armor and I'll spare your life. Han Sen turned around and launched another kick in rage. The young man grabbed Han Sen's leg and twisted it, wrestled him down and came down hard on his back with a knee. Ah! Han Sen uttered a scream, feeling his spine about to break. Scum is always scum, even with a sacred blood beast soul. The young man named Shui Longyan continuously hit Han Sen on the back of head, knocking his head into a rock. He cried ferociously, "Surrender the sacred blood beast soul. It's not meant for scum like you. Asshole." Han Sen's blood was burning. He suddenly raised his head and butted Shui Longyan's face with his helmet. Blood splashed from Shui Longyan's nose. He covered his nose and backed off. Han Sen regained freedom and immediately summoned the Bloody Slayer. The moment he turned into the monstrous figure, he threw himself at Shui Longyan. Shui Longyan kept chopping at Han Sen, while Han Sen ignored all the attacks from his tough hands and held him down tightly, the cow-shaped head knocking on his head. Who is scum? Who the F***K is scum? Han Sen knocked madly on Shui Longyan's head over and over again. Super God Gene, Chapter 13. While Shui Longyan was struggling to kick Han Sen, the latter ignored him and rammed his face with the cow head. It didn't take long before Shui Longyan's body went limp. When Han Sen finally calmed down, he was already dead, with his face smashed in like a hunk of meat. With the body of a bloody slayer and sacred blood beast soul armor, even those who practiced hyper-geno arts couldn't resist such brutal impact. Han Sen let go of the body, and Shui Longyan fell to the floor like a pool of mud. Having dismissed the beast souls, Han Sen felt a severe pain. It was hurting so much in a few spots that it felt like his bones were broken. Han Sen dreaded to think what could have happened. He was injured so badly, even with the shapeshifting and armor. Shui Longyan's hyper-geno art was really quite something. If he had the same beast souls, Han Sen wouldn't be a match for him. Looking at the dead body, Han Sen hesitated and then searched the body. There was a wallet, with no cash but several crystal credit cards in it, deluxe ones with high credit lines. He also found a memory chip. After some thought, Han Sen destroyed the wallet and credit cards and threw them, along with the dead body, into the deep pond, while keeping the memory chip. Several iron-toothed crocodiles emerged from the water and snapped at the dead body. Soon even the bones were gone. Han Sen was relieved and turned away. Too injured to keep hunting, Han Sen returned to Steel Armor Shelter, enduring the pain. The gang of Son of Heaven were still looking for Dollar, and the bounty had been raised. Unfortunately, no one had any interaction with Han Sen, so no one would know Dollar was actually Ass Freak. People were still talking about Dollar on the streets. Han Sen went all the way back to his room and checked out the copper-toothed beast, which had turned bronze in most parts, although the shade was still lighter than a true mutant copper-toothed beast. It probably would take more time for the evolution to complete. Teleporting out of God's sanctuary, Han Sen went to see a doctor. Multiple fractures of the bone were diagnosed, and it took the doctor a long time to fix all of them. Fortunately, Han Sen still had the 10,000 he earned from Su Xiaoqiao, or else he wouldn't even have been able to afford the medical bills. Back home from the hospital, Han Sen closed the door and inserted the memory chip into a smart gadget, trying to find out Shui Longyan's identity. Able to cross the mountains and swamps to reach Steel Armor Shelter and having practiced a hyper-geno art that looked very advanced, Shui Longyan would be a formidable opponent if he still had his beast souls with him and had not been injured. The smart gadget displayed the contents of the memory chip and Han Sen only had to look for a while before he became wild with joy. Hyper-geno arts, it's a tutorial for hyper-geno arts. Han Sen almost laughed out loud. The hologram stored in the chip was a naked woman making odd movements while reciting arcane incantations. With each movement, she would also give some explanation. Although the woman was extremely beautiful, Han Sen was completely attracted to what she was talking about and had no other thoughts. Jadeskin, isn't this the hypo-geno art used by Shui Longyan? Han Sen had seen the power of jade skin when Shui Longyan used it, and became even more happy. Having locked himself in the room for 48 hours, Han Sen finally memorized everything in the chip and destroyed it, as it could become a pitfall in the future. After watching the jade skin tutorial, Han Sen had a stronger sense that Shui Longyan must have been somebody significant. Han Sen began to practice jade skin as he was recovering. He had thought before about buying a tutorial of a hyper-geno art, after he had earned some money. However, the ones that could be bought were all cheap, unlike jade skin, which he could tell was premium. Knowing that practicing jade skin might eventually expose him, Han Sen still decided to begin. If he missed jade skin, he might never have the opportunity to practice a premium hyper-geno art. Having practiced for several days, Han Sen felt his body had become cooler. And his body temperature was indeed 35 degrees Fahrenheit lower than normal. It was not a discomfort, but rather a refreshing feeling. Han Sen felt more fit, as if his body cells were full of energy. His body temperature didn't change further as he kept on practicing. Han Sen became more and more fit and his skin more and more smooth. Han Sen, what have you been up to lately? It's been a while since we met. Let's hang out sometime. The hologram of a smiling handsome long-haired man about Han Sen's age popped out from the comlink. Where are we going? Han Sen was delighted to see Zhang Danfeng, the long-haired guy. They grew up together, and he was son of Mr. Zhang, the lawyer. Come out first. Han Hao and Shui Shi are also with me, and we are almost there, Zhang Danfeng said. Sure. Han Sen nodded and went out the door. There was a small private jet parked outside, and Zhang Danfeng was waving to him from the driver's seat. Han Sen got in and saw a girl and a guy talking in the back seats. The girl named Shui Shi was very pretty and gentle, and the guy was Han Hao, son of Han Sen's fat aunt. Han Sen's aunt was an aggressive woman, so Han Hao inherited her family name. The four young people had all grown up together. However, after Han Sen's father's accident, he could only go to integrated compulsory education, while the rest were in private schools. Han Sen nodded to Han Hao and Shui Shi and sat in the co-pilot seat. Han Hao took a look at him and continued to talk to Shui Shi, ignoring Han Sen. Shui Shi, you should see it. Dollar just waved his hand and turned into a monster with horse legs, a human upper body and a cow head and golden armor. Son of Heaven and his gang could do nothing but watch him gallop away. Super God Gene, Chapter 14. Han Sen was somewhat surprised to see Han Hao sputtering on. He did not know Han Hao was also randomly sent to the steel armor shelter. Han Hao was 3 months younger than him, so he should have just had his birthday and gained access to God's sanctuary. For unknown reasons, if those under 16 were teleported, their bodies would suffer irreversible damage. So according to the Alliance laws, one must be 16 years old to be teleported to God's sanctuary, regardless of social status. Hey Frenzy, where are we going? Han Sen asked Zhang Danfeng. Although Zhang Danfeng was a good-looking man, he became crazy whenever he was in a fight, hence the nickname. Zhang Danfeng's face lit up. Starlight Martial Hall. My idol Tang Junliu's going to be in an exhibition fight held there. He was the chosen last year, and his broadsword skills are so fierce. Zhang Danfeng was full of yearning. In this era where everyone was focused on evolution, stars no longer came from acting, singing, sports and e-sports, but from fighting. In God's sanctuary, once every year the martial hall of each shelter would open at the same time, and those in the top 100 could have their names on the martial steel in the martial hall. The champions from each shelter would be eligible to compete among themselves. And the same happened in all 4 phases of God's sanctuary. The top 10 from each phase could have their names on the sacred steel, which was public to everyone in the same phase, and gain the title, the Chosen. And the 10 chosen would become the hottest stars of the year. In recent years, Qin Zan had always been the champion of steel armor shelter, but her name was never on the sacred steel, so she was never among the top 10 of First God's Sanctuary. Ranking number 5 last year, Tang Junliu was known for his fierce broadsword skills. He was very popular among young people and even more well-liked than the top 4. He was paid as high as 10 million levo dollars for any exhibition match. Knowing his popularity, Han Sen was nevertheless shocked when he saw a full house at Starlight Martial Hall, which could accommodate more than 100,000 people. Many crazy fans were holding signs and calling out Tang Junliu's name. When he appeared, a girl was so excited that she fainted. If I could have my name on the sacred steel like Tang Junliu once in my life, then I'd know I've lived. Zhang Danfeng said admiringly. You will frenzy. Han Sen smiled and said, watching the young people around him going crazy for Tang Junliu's appearance. It's so hard. I have entered God's sanctuary for 3 months already. Although I bought some primitive flesh and a primitive beast soul, it's still difficult for me to hunt any mutant creatures. If I could buy a mutant beast soul, it would be much easier. But even if I had the money, people wouldn't necessarily sell their mutant beast souls. Zhang Danfeng shook his head with a wry smile. Han Sen thought to himself regretfully, the only thing that could be brought from God's sanctuary to the real world was a beast soul, while it can only be used but not traded there. Otherwise I could produce mutant creatures and would gain some mutant beast souls eventually, which could be really helpful to Frenzy. Ha ha, then I have better luck than you, Danfeng. I just entered God's sanctuary and have already gained a mutant beast soul. Such a pity you are not in steel armor shelter, or else we could hunt together and I could help you, Han Hao said proudly. You've gained a mutant beast soul already. Tell the truth, did you hunt it or pay for it? Zhang Danfeng cried, staring at Han Hao. Of course I hunted it myself, Han Hao said loudly. Han Sen laughed to himself. Since he was a kid, Han Hao had always raised his voice when he lied. His parents probably bought him the mutant beast soul with an enormous amount of money. The cheapest mutant beast soul would cost millions, and good ones tens of millions. So that's why his relatives were after the old house. It was a huge expense for them. Although the company had earned a lot of money, they had probably spent it all by now. Tang Junliu was indeed awesome. Although it was just an exhibition fight, his broadsword skills were so swift and fierce that his broadsword almost became invisible. After watching for a while, Han Sen knew that Tang Junliu must have practiced premium hyper-geno arts and learned his weapon skills from masters, and he was no competition to Tang Junliu. Tang Junliu won the fight and summoned a beast soul to perform, shapeshifting into a 3-meter-tall Tyrannosaurus creature and smashing a huge stone with its head, arousing a burst of screaming. Sacred blood beast soul of raging Dementor. I would do anything for a beast soul like this. Zhang Danfeng stared at Tang Junliu, who turned into a monster with a watering mouth. This is nothing. This beast soul is nothing like the $1 has. Han Hao sputtered about dollar as if it were himself. It would take a showdown to tell. Tang Junliu was Danfeng's idol, so he was upset to hear that. I don't know how good dollar was, but his sacred blood beast soul was robbed from others, and it was not a chivalric act. Even if he had a great beast soul, he would not be comparable to Junliu. Han Sen blushed with shame and thought, oh Frenzy, you didn't know what a hard time I was having. How could I let go of an opportunity like that? Not to mention Son of Heaven was my enemy. Han Sen was hesitating whether or not to tell them that dollar was himself but decided not to. It wouldn't do them any good, after all. Super God Gene. Chapter 15 Selling Flesh. Han Sen kept practicing Jadeskin and recovering after he returned home. Every 2 days he went to God's sanctuary to check on the copper-toothed beast. It took the beast half a month from the time it swallowed the black crystal to become a mutant creature, but it was still the size of an ordinary copper-toothed beast, while the mutant copper-toothed beasts Han Sen had seen were twice that size. In addition to the size, the one he evolved into wasn't much stronger either, not even close to a true mutant one. Han Sen took out his alloy dagger and slashed the beast on the neck, but caused no damage at all. It was his dagger that chipped. So it is somewhat different from an ordinary one. Han Sen shapeshifted into a bloody slayer and snapped its neck by force. Mutant copper-toothed beast killed. No beast soul gained. Eat its flesh to gain 0 to 10 mutant geno points. The sound in his mind overjoyed Han Sen. It might look different than a wild mutant copper-toothed beast, but it was fine as long as it was indeed a mutant creature. Now what was troubling him was how to sell this mutant copper-toothed beast. He really needed the money, or else he could just eat it to gain mutant geno points. It is too dangerous for me to sell it showing up as dollar, now that the entire shelter is looking for him. But it would also be troublesome if I were to sell it using my own true identity. Han Sen still decided to use dollar's name after some hesitation. Su Xiaoqiao was depressed these days. Qin Zan asked him to find dollar, but he didn't know dollar any more than she did, so what was he supposed to do? Early in the morning, Su Xiaoqiao was tripped by something and fell flat on his face. Who is this #cur that placed a stone in front of my room? He's dead if I find out. Even more depressed than before, Xiaoqiao saw that there was something under the stone. He took a closer look and found a note in a bundle. The note said, goods worth 50,000 delivered. We are square. If you want more, come to Zephyr Valley tomorrow. Cash only. Although there was no signature, a coin was drawn at the lower left corner, making clear who it was from. Dollar. Su Xiaoqiao was thrilled but didn't make a sound this time. Looking around and seeing no one, he took the bundle and note and closed the door. Su Xiaoqiao carefully opened the bundle and saw a long strip of meat jerky the size of 2 or 3 bites. Su Xiaoqiao chewed up the meat jerky and swallowed. Mutant copper-toothed beast flesh eaten. 1 mutant geno point gained. The voice in his mind surprised Xiaoqiao, mutant copper-toothed beast flesh. So it was hunted by dollar. He must have more now that he asked me to bring cash to Zephyr Valley. Thinking of this, he got even more excited that he could bring Chinzon's message to Dollar and buy mutant flesh from him at the same time. Early in the morning, Su Xiaoqiao set off to Zephyr Valley. He waited from early morning to noon but didn't see Dollar coming. Cash T, he must have fooled me. Su Xiaoqiao was so upset that he was preparing to leave, but then heard someone say, "You brought cash." Shocked, Su Xiaoqiao turned around and saw Dollar in golden armor emerging from below the ground. "Brother, did you hide there all morning?" Su Xiaoqiao said, staring at Han Sen. "I've been hiding here since last night. You know what's going on right now, and I have to be careful," Han Sen said casually. "I admire you, Dollar, but you really have nothing to worry about. I'm so grateful you would sell me mutant flesh and would never betray you." Su Xiaoqiao gave Han Sen the thumbs up. It was incredible that he could stay underground for the whole night and the entire morning. It must have been so uncomfortable. "Cut the crap. Did you bring the money?" Han Sen pulled out another bundle from the pit where he was hiding and placed it in front of Xiaoqiao. Su Xiaoqiao looked inside the bundle, which was full of the same meat jerky he had eaten yesterday. There must have been more than 5 pounds of it. He excitedly asked, "Dollar, did you make all this from the mutant copper-toothed beast?" "Yep, an entire mutant copper-toothed beast is right here. 2 million, and no bargaining," Han Sen said. "Well, 2 million is fine." Su Xiaoqiao handed 2 stacks of 10,000 notes to Han Sen, but doubted whether the entire beast was really there, as there should have been more meat. Han Sen noticed his doubt, took the money and said, "This meat jerky is made in traditional ways, so it shrank a bit. Rest assured that the whole beast is here." Han Sen made the copper-toothed beast into meat jerky so that no one would wonder why the beast was so tiny. "Of course I trust you." Su Xiaoqiao paused and said, "Dollar, you should know that I work for Chinzon. She has a message for you. She wants to buy the sacred blood beast soul and golden axe you gained the other day, and she could offer you a good price." "Oh, what is the price?" Han Sen was interested in selling the golden axe, as it was not that portable. He hadn't found a chance to use it, so it was still buried. "You will have to figure this out yourselves. I'm just the messenger," Su Xiaoqiao shrugged and said. "If you meet with Chinzon, tell her if she really wants to buy it, she can name a price and you can bring it to me," Han Sen said lightly. It was too risky for her to meet Chinzon.